Hello and welcome back to the Matrix Green Pill podcast. I am Marie Hutchison, and today I am so excited to introduce Sean Morris. Sean is a former professional cricketer turned visionary leader in the sports industry who is now pioneering the integration of sustainability and sports through his groundbreaking work with 1.5 Degrees Sport. Sean, welcome and thank you so much for joining me today.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me, Hilary.
So before we dive into what you're working on currently, could you share with our audience a little bit about you and your background?
Yeah, I have been involved in professional sport now for about 35 years. During my time at university, my summer job was actually to go and play cricket. And I then played pro cricket for about 10 years, was fortunate to travel the world with that. As I exited my professional playing career, I moved into sports goods, an area that I was actually pretty comfortable with.
So that move that you made then from being a professional player to being on the business side of things, what were some of the challenges that you faced moving from sports into the business side?
It was quite an interesting environment because everyone else had been there for sort of 8-9 years, knew exactly what they were doing. I had never experienced an office, so I didn't really know how things work. Fortunately, I was part of an amazing team and they really supported me. I actually went back to night school for a couple of years to sort of learn a bit about management. There were strange things that you felt that you were kind of the new boy at school and had to learn really basic things of, how do you work with the mailroom, for example, or what happens when your computer doesn't work. They were fun times and very formative.
A steep learning curve during that time.
It was very steep. When you're learning, as long as you've got the support around you, you're okay being out of your comfort zone. And that was something that obviously professional sport had taught me, that being outside your comfort zone is not a bad thing, as long as you've got support around you. And I was very lucky, and I look back on it very fondly. The people around me, the management team, were absolutely fantastic.
Having the right people around you makes all the difference because they can make or break the decisions that you try and put into place.
Absolutely.
Before we get into 1.5 Degrees Sport, you served as the CEO of the Professional Cricketers Association and later the Rajasthan Royals IPL franchise. What were some of the most significant leadership lessons that you learned while you were in these roles?
There were so many, Hilary, but I think the professional cricketers was an interesting one because one of the key parts of that role is actually managing part of the England cricket team. So you've got high-profile international players, very, very talented. And you start to recognize you've got to get everyone going in the same direction. Everyone's got different individual motivations. One of the things we did was we brought the England team back to India after the Mumbai bomb attacks. Now, there were clearly people in that group that didn't want to go. And then there were others desperately did. So you had completely opposing positions when you enter a room and you talk to the players, and you've really got to get into the personal motivations with each individual and then try and shape that into a collective direction. I mean, that was an incredible experience. And then obviously working in India, I lived out there for 4 years. That is a bit of a baptism of fire because you go into an organization. I was the only non-Indian in that team. How people react to you is incredibly important, much more important than it is in a Western office. And how you manage, people from different cultures is totally different. So you get exposed to things you never thought would happen, ever. I had a senior guy who was essentially kidnapped before our first game because the local police needed more tickets. Now, nothing prepares you for that. So you learn to be nimble, you learn to control the controllables and then manage as best you can those things that are out of your control. So fascinating roles, both of those.
Another steep learning curve, and especially going to another country, as you say, being the odd man out in a way, certainly had to adjust. Would you call it a culture shock or a cultural adjustment?
It's an adjustment. But actually, I'd been going to India in my first role. I had to go and buy some of the factories out there. And I think because I was fortunate to travel with my sport, I've always embraced the different cultural experience of going overseas. Your first role in an Indian factory buying sports products, it's completely new. As I got more senior and then ended up running an IPL franchise, there were lots and lots of completely new experiences around me. But I think that's part of your sort of personal development of reacting in the right way, knowing what's important, working out what isn't important. It's largely been steep learning curves, but very exciting ones, actually.
And from what you're saying, it sounds like your mindset was crucial in adapting to these different roles that you had, changing from being a professional player to the business side, to being CEO, to running all these various things. Having that open mindset, taking these things on, wanting to learn, makes all the difference.
I grew up in a sporting family. I've always been hugely engaged in sport, and it has clearly taught me an immense amount of things, but not dwelling on too much of the past. I mean, one of the things about professional sport is you've got to live in the moment. You can't get too far ahead of yourself. And you see athletes and sports stars saying this all the time. Actually, without knowing it, if you adopt those characteristics, perhaps better than some others, you develop an ability to go, okay, that went wrong. Okay, I've learned that we don't want to do that again, but I can move on quickly because I've got to face the next ball. And India was very much like that. You've really got to deal with what's in front of you now because things change very, very quickly. I mean, one of the things that changed was, you're sitting there running a business that was worth $250 million at the time. You wake up in the morning and you don't have a business. It's basically been completely shut down through politics. You could freak out. It wasn't an easy phone call to the shareholders to say that we were $250 million worse off overnight. You do realize that that is a massive challenge and you kind of take it on. Without a doubt, that behavioral instincts from my side was developed through sport.
Yes, I love that. I think that's a good lesson to learn. And I think, as you say, sport is the perfect place to learn that because if you hit a bad ball or something went wrong, you can't dwell on it. You've got to learn from it and move forward, face the next thing that's coming. I think that's excellent.
You're exactly right, Hilary. And I think given what's going on, that has become increasingly significant to a lot of people. And that's clearly shaped where we're going now.
Yeah, I think these days things are moving faster. Things are changing much quicker than they did in the past. So I think that adaptability for anybody would be a fantastic skill to have, to adjust, to fail fast, make those mistakes, learn from them and move on, take on the next challenge. I think that's becoming more and more important today. Let's talk about the 1.5 degree sport. So in 2022, you established 1.5 degree sport. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
So unapologetically, I had lived on the commercial side of sport for the last 20 years, constantly trying to develop deals and commercial revenue streams. And actually, it was so binary. You look at what is the value of the total sports market in sponsorship, which is obviously the driver to it. And it's about $150 billion a year. I started talking to some amazing people who'd worked in sustainability. A figure came out of that is that the investment level was about 5 trillion a year. I was like, well, my maths is reasonable. I would much prefer to be focusing on the 5 trillion. That was kind of the trigger that said, well, let me have a look at this. And then suddenly it started to marry up with what sport could do for sustainability. And I think that was the trigger because everybody else had been looking at what sustainability could do for sport. Yeah, there's two halves here, like every good game. The first half was sport was looking at itself very, from a distance and going, we need to be more sustainable. But actually looking outside of sport, it was role could sport play in the broader sustainability industries. And that was the bit that really excited me.
And why sustainability? Why the shift to sustainability? Why did that become important to you?
Without recognizing it, you're probably going through a period in your life where, I've got 2 kids now who are actually 20s, and you sort of think about their futures without really that dictating. It does occur to you. You look further forward. It was actually another piece. I didn't really understand it. I didn't understand the sustainability conversation. So you start digging into a bit, and I found it quite complex. So you kind of wanted to learn a bit more about it. There was a trigger. I was sitting on a bench in the beautiful town of Oxford, watching a cricket game with a 70-year-old Oxford professor who'd spent 30 years in environmental in the ECI at Oxford University. He happened to be a cricket fan. I said, I don't really understand the language, if I'm honest. Net zero and climate positive, is this jargon. And so we turned the entire conversation into using sports language. Suddenly it was like, okay, absolutely got this. Because sport is the largest cultural activity on the planet. Everybody knows the increasing influence that sports stars are having socially, their levels of engagement, particularly younger fans. You take, a footballer in the UK and his social media following versus the Prime Minister is probably 50 to 100 times bigger. So once you start turning it into the sports language, it became very obvious to me it was essential that we really lean into this, and a massive opportunity, because all sports matches are about attack and defense. Right. I started to look at what was going on in sustainability, which was kind of a degrowth strategy. So it was do less of things. That to me was defense. And to win, you've got to have good defense, right? You've got to have a good goalkeeper and you've got to have a good right back. And that pretty much applies in every sport. But actually, you then look at a football team and go, who gets fans out of their seats? And it's all the people who are playing in attack. So Lionel Messi, Ronaldo's, they all play up front. You just then watch a sports game and you see someone score a try, for example, and everyone jumps out of their seat. You see someone make a great tackle or a try-saving tackle, and everyone puts their head in their hands going, ooh. And that, to me, was just like, hold on. The opportunity here for sport to provide the catalyst for change in behaviour is immense. And we've kind of been dancing around it of, yes, we've got a social impact and it's health and it's CSR initiatives, but I think we're missing the biggest opportunity of all time.
That's fantastic. I love tapping into the sports phrases to explain all the different parts and how to understand sustainability. That's brilliant. And how doing less is defensive, but it's the attackers, it's doing something what excites people. I think that's excellent. Then you established the first climate change commercial partnership with the Desert Vipers cricket franchise. Is that what was next that happened? Yeah.
That's obviously a new cricket franchise. It's owned by the Glazers, obviously Manchester United ownership group. That was not without its challenges. And it kind of started over a coffee. The new chief exec I'd known from previous years. We kind of had a friendly chat about how it was going to go for him. Having worked in this region and obviously formerly been in India, I could understand their P&L without even looking at it. I knew immediately the numbers in their P&L were not going to match up to what they thought they were. We had a coffee, a very sort of lighthearted chat. And I said, well, given you're operating out of Dubai, you're trying to create some sort of community programs. Most of the investment in Dubai was around COP. So why wouldn't you, given you've got a blank piece of paper because you're new, why wouldn't you set yourself up as the sports greenest, cleanest, most sustainable franchise? Because it kind of felt obvious. And to be fair, I didn't get laughed out of the room, but I would say that, Sean's probably not drinking coffee. He's probably drinking something else. We managed to sort of stay in touch. I tried to help them out a little bit in their first year. And then about 6 months later, after their first year and their P&L didn't look like they thought it looked, they came back and said, no, actually, we need to really lean into this. And that was the start of the process that said, right, if you're going to lean into it, we better do it properly. And people started changing their titles. Commercial directors became sustainability directors. And that to me was the signal, because they had worked out it was better for them personally to move across. So that was kind of a bit of a watershed moment.
You had already made that shift in your mind. You had already seen where it needed to go, why it needed to go there. But this was something new you were introducing to someone else. This is not the big thing. This doesn't match up. But then, as you say, in time, once they could see that the way they were doing things in the past was not the way forward, and actually commercial success would be tied in with being conscious of the environment, sustainability, climate change. And then once you can see that connection, well, now we're open to looking at how to do this, how to implement it.
100%. I knew beforehand, like many industries, there are two levers that basically are going to influence their direction and how they behave. One, which is massively powerful, is financial failure. So if you fail, you go, well, we have to change, otherwise we're not going to exist. And that's, funny enough, that's very typical across sports. And then the second one is sports operates as like a pyramid sponsorship model, which has been going on for as long as I've been involved in it. They look at how do you pull a financial lever that increases the size of that pyramid. That was essentially what we did. We went and said, right, we've got a financial lever. We'll pull it and we will bring you more money. And then you can spend it on players or marketing or whatever you want. Those are the two drivers in sport. They're probably pretty similar across most industries, I would say.
Yes, absolutely. Then you launched the first ever clever sports carbon credit, which is now being rolled out across teams and leagues in India, the UK, and Dubai. Can you tell our audience a little bit about the sports carbon credit?
When you take a team and you really commit to this, the first thing obviously you've got to do is understand what is the score today, because you don't know how to play from here if you don't know what the score is. So we measured their footprint. We've got a figure that we go, okay, we know this is what running the team, it costs in terms of emissions. Now, cricket is unique because obviously it's built around a natural bat and it's, that takes 20 years to grow. And through my previous roles of making these products, I knew the suppliers who had been growing trees. It's a fifth generation farming family who control 75% of the world's willow. So I went back to them and said, look, you've got a beautiful story around these handcrafted, farmed nature. You've got a sport where it's the second most popular sport on the planet, and we could calculate the carbon in the trees that you sequester, and then we can start telling stories around, England players walking out to bat at Lords, and we can actually calculate the amount of carbon in a cricket bat. That was kind of where it started. But we then wanted to look at, part of the challenge with these sports teams is, they can't not play. So you're going to have a footprint, right? To help them, you have to have some form of offsetting. And we thought we'd make it relevant to their sport. So that was really where the carbon credit came from. We then started to develop it and think, well, you've got one team with a pretty small footprint, and that would apply across, most teams have got a reasonably small footprint. But what sports needs is a collective place to go, a collective place where they can trust they're supporting proper programs with data that is properly measured. That was really where it started. It had very strong relevance to that particular sport right at the beginning. And actually, one of the things that happened out of it is not only did they offset their entire footprint, but they also invested in additional trees just because they felt it was the right thing to do. So each player has got a tree which will take 15 to 20 years to grow, and then it'll make 50 bats. That's player owned. I think that's the beginning of quite a lot of activity in that space.
That's excellent. So in practical terms, they are giving back, putting back, so to offset their own carbon footprint. That's excellent. So besides the planting of the trees, are there any other things, any other initiatives that they are part of to offset their carbon footprint?
That particular team, no. We're in a really exciting space at the moment where we're working with some amazing technology brands. There's an incredible clean energy brand that is supporting the event we're doing in Dubai called Duna Energy. And we're looking at developing a cross-sport carbon credit with them. And that's something that hopefully we'll be releasing in December. It's taken me into a space of sort of technology, which is clearly not my area of expertise. I mean, you meet some thrilling, inventive, passionate people, and Duna Energy are just spectacular in what they're doing. They get the sports story. They understand how they can make a difference. It can apply to stadiums, their technology. It can apply to fans, and it can apply to players. So, we're in the process of developing that, and hopefully we'll be launching it in December at the Sport Impact Summit here in Dubai.
Wow, that sounds exciting. Again, partnering with the right people, especially when it's not your field, again, makes all the difference because they understand their side of things and how best to apply it. 1.5 Degree Sport is also, you've come back full circle to Oxford University, and you are in a partnership with the Environmental Change Institute of Oxford University. So how important is education in driving the sustainability agenda in sports, and what role does your program play in this?
That is a superb question, because the answer to it, it's absolutely the most important part of the entire debate. This is kind of where I had that moment sitting on a bench with an old professor. And he explained to me, when you take one of the world's leading sustainability professors, whatever field they're in, this is an incredibly linear process of learning. So you start off with some theory, you then have some research, you then have some testing, you then probably got pushback. And eventually, over 10 years, you end up possibly with a white paper and some policy. That is typically what they've been doing for 30 years. And they're really, really the best in the world at that. You think about the time that takes and the problems we got to face. He said, how do you learn a sport? When you're young or whatever age, someone gives you a ball or a bat or a racket, tells you to get outside and have a go. And that's what you do, right? You learn immediately whether this is difficult, this is hard, what have I got to do? As you get better, you will then most likely get coached. Your learning curve is immediate. When you're sitting there and people who've been world leaders in this for 30 years say we have to adopt sports learning system, which is you've got to have a go at this. You might not be brilliant at it, but you've got to get out and have a go. That's when it started to make sense to me. So education, we don't need everyone to be an expert. And that's kind of the problem, I think, with a lot of the media. We need is everyone to get on the pitch and have a go because we need more players. That's kind of absolutely the central foundation to tackling the challenges that are ahead of us.
Excellent. So it's not about being perfect. It's not about knowing all the right things to do, doing everything at once. It's about taking that first step, being willing to practice, to say, okay, I'm going to try one thing. I'm going to try this. I'm going to try that. And that is the way to learning, to getting better and to say, okay, I can now manage this part. I can add on to my education and grow from there.
100%. And this is why, again, sports is so powerful. I was sitting with a very senior leader of a sports rights holder yesterday. Their immediate pushback is, well, I don't know if we can do the sustainability thing because, we've got a sponsor that's probably a fossil fuel company. We've got lots of travel, I'm not sure it looks great. You go, well, okay, they're fair. And by the way, that's the pushback you hear everywhere. Okay, so do you ever play the perfect game? You don't, never. You might strive to. There is nothing more consistent than marginal gains in sport. You get better each day. Your job is to be better tomorrow than you were today. That's what training is about. That's what fitness is about. That's why health and well-being is so central to it. When you start saying, look, please don't try and be perfect and don't set yourself up to be perfect. I say, we're going to have a go. We're going to try. And I don't care if it's one thing, because of your influence and because of your ability to educate the fan base, then you are doing the right thing and you'll learn as you go. So I hear that all the time. And I think that once you turn that around and say, you're not perfect in what you do every single day. So why you start something unless you think you've got to be perfect? And it's kind of fear. That's what we're trying to help other teams understand. This is your opportunity. And there's nothing to be frightened of.
That makes absolute sense. As you said, whether it's sport, whether it's a new habit, whether it's any goal we set, it's taking those first small steps, just marginally changing, improving. So find the next step to do rather than planning it out until we're going to be perfect. I love that. Sort of on a similar line, because we've been speaking a lot about cricket, but looking at the broader sports industry, what do you believe are the biggest opportunities and challenges for integrating sustainable practices into professional sports?
I think the biggest challenges are there's essentially no expertise. Why would you have expertise in sports sustainability when it's very new to that industry? There's no one who's been working in it for a long period of time. You have to find those people and bring them in, and then they've got to fit into a sports organisation, which typically are culturally different. One of the things with Oxford was we took a master's graduate in sustainability and we employed him. And then we second him to the cricket franchise. So essentially, the person sitting in that franchise has got more sustainability training and knowledge, plus access to a resource, Oxford University, than anybody else in the league. And this is his first job. I think that is one of the big challenges, lack of expertise and opportunity for those people that are in a space in sport to showcase what they're doing and collaborate, because many of those roles are defensive roles. That's where I think we've got to bring it out and make it an attacking role. So I want to see sustainability managers, which is kind of the new role. I want to see them in the commercial teams or the marketing teams or the communication teams, whereas they're much more likely to sit in the operations team. I think that's a completely different job. The opportunity is the single biggest commercial opportunity sport has had, certainly in my time, probably since they invented online betting. Anyway, sport has just done that to the billions of dollars. Because if you lean into this and you look at the investment that brands are trying to make in their own journeys, there is no one better at telling stories than sport and engaging fans. That's really where I think the opportunity is. If you can engage fans in behavioral change, even tiny behavioral change, sponsorship is about shared values. And if you've got companies now that are changing their values to be more sustainable, and you're doing that on the sports field, you become a much better partner. And that's where I think it's just the sky's the limit in that opportunity. And I think there'll be some early adopters that will do really, really well. And there'll be others that will do the minimum because they'll see it as a cost. So the opportunity to see this is revenue instead of cost.
I love that you are taking the lead in this and that you are so passionate about this because, as you say, the impact that sports can have in the change in so many people is phenomenal. So it's absolutely brilliant that this is something that you've taken on and that you are pushing forward.
That impact is very early in life. So that's the other thing we've got to do. You look at young fans, all these teams are trying to chase young fans, get them in, support them. So you've got to get there early. And that generation, as I've seen, are more interested and committed to health and wellness, sustainability, recycling, whatever it is. In terms of that opportunity to reach, we're doing an event in Dubai in December. We're bringing in sports icons, league, Formula One teams, golfers to come and talk about sustainability from the pro sports position. We set out a very simple mission, and that was to reach 1 billion people in 48 hours. There's nothing else that can do it. I'll be disappointed if we don't get near 2 billion, because when you look at the people that are turning up, you've got people who've already got 50 million followers or 100 million followers. In those followers lies the solution to sustainability by motivating them to get on the pit, help change the scoreboard. And that's what we're hoping to do with the Sport Impact Summit in December.
Given your experience, understanding the challenges, the opportunities, what advice would you give to other sports organizations or leaders who are wanting to also make a meaningful impact in the realm of sustainability?
I would keep it very simple. Don't be worried about your lack of expertise in this space, because you'll get there very, very quickly. Don't be worried about being perfect, because nothing in your organization is perfect. Your organization is probably better equipped to fail and get back up and do it again, because you do that every week. And that's completely unique. You do not see other businesses where on a Saturday you lose and everyone turns up on Monday and they're feeling dreadful, but they get back up and they compete again next Saturday. And that's an amazing part of that industry that can be harnessed towards driving improvements in sustainability and making a massive impact on the planet.
Excellent. Good advice. And hopefully the audience will listen and get this message out so that others can also start making an impact. Now we've come to the segment of our show where I'll ask you some rapid fire questions, our version of a game show. So the Olympics are just over. What's your favorite Olympic sport?
I'm going to go for a strange one. I'm going to say hockey. And that's partly because my father played in the 68 Olympics as a hockey player. I went to London 2012 to watch all the hockey matches. So I've got a big skew on that. I mean, how good was the volleyball and the basketball? With the women's volleyball and the women's basketball were my probably two favourites from Paris.
And how did England do in the hockey?
Not brilliant. I think we got knocked out by India before the semis.
How do you relax on the weekend?
My guilty pleasure is hitting golf balls. And it's not because I'm great at it. It cleanses the mind, I find. That's kind of been the case for a long time. Get out there and hit a few golf balls and not worry about things too much.
What is your favorite book?
But I do have one, and this was actually very influential. I think it's by Matthew Said, who wrote a book called, I think it's Black Box Thinking. He performed for GB at table tennis, a great journalist, and he went around and interviewed a lot of high performance teams from, Mercedes Formula One, British cycling. There's some absolute gold in that book. So I love that. And I just read Legacy, which was recommended to me by a very good friend, which is all about the All Black. Yeah, those are two amazing books.
And what is one thing you do every day, no matter how busy you get?
Check social media to see where your kids are. So yeah, that's probably my one guarantee every day. I'm sure there are lots of things that I shouldn't do every day, but that's probably one of them.
That was the end of the game show. Thank you for playing along. That was easy enough. Now, before we wrap up, we'd like to do our green pill moment. So could you please share an inspiring or life-changing experience that you have gone through, your green pill moment?
I think the most recent one was that sitting on a bench looking at the beautiful backdrop of Oxford and realizing that when a world-class professor says that we need your help, you can sit there and go, yeah, okay, fine, I'll move on. Or you kind of grab it and think, I wasn't expecting that. And here is a massive opportunity and incredibly fulfilling. I think that's probably the most recent one, which only happened, a couple of years back. I'm still in touch with Ian, the professor. We speak pretty much every week. And he's probably one of the most inspiring people I've ever come across.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing that story. And I'm so happy that you met him as well, because you are making a difference. I'm happy that you took it on, that you didn't just, as you said, walk away from it, but that has changed your direction direction in life, and you are making an impact that's going to get bigger and bigger as people accept and hear the message. So thank you very much for what you are doing. It matters for sure. But before we say goodbye, could you please tell our listeners where they can find and follow you? And we'll also put this in the show notes.
That's 1.5degreesport.com is our website, and Instagram will be the same, and we'll be posting a load of stuff there. There'll be a lot more activity around the Sport Impact Summit, which we co-founded with an amazing group called Identity, who are actually the team behind COP. So we have got lots of surprises coming there. You'll see some incredible partners and some really innovative stuff around an event to reach 1 billion people. So that's probably the best place to go, which is sportimpactsummit.com.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And again, thank you so much for being here today. I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation with you. I've learned a lot, and I'll be following your journey as well.
Well, thank you for having me, Hilmer. It's been an absolute pleasure.
If you enjoy our conversations, please like and subscribe. See you next Wednesday.